I used to believe that hard work was like a silent bank account. I thought that every late night, every perfectly organized spreadsheet, and every saved client was a deposit that would eventually pay off in a big way. For 6 years at Skybound Logistics, I was the first one in and the last one out. I knew the names of our drivers' children and the exact fuel efficiency of our entire fleet. I was the engine room of the company, working in the heat and the grease, so the people on the upper decks could enjoy the view. My CEO, Julian Vane, always smiled at me in the hallways. He called me the backbone of the operations department. I took that as a compliment back then. I didn't realize that a backbone is something people rely on to hold them up, but they never actually look at it. They just expect it to be there, doing the heavy lifting without making a sound. When the senior director of operations position opened up, I didn't even think I had a campaign for it. My numbers spoke for themselves. I had reduced overhead by 20% in a single fiscal year. I was ready to lead. The meeting was set for a rainy Tuesday morning. I wore my best suit, the one I had saved for my father's funeral and my own wedding. I felt a sense of calm as I walked toward Julian's office. I had my portfolio ready, a thick binder filled with data, testimonials from our biggest shipping partners, and a 5-year growth plan that I had spent months perfecting. When I entered, Julian wasn't alone. Sitting in the guest chair was Leo Vance. Leo was the golden boy of the sales team. He was charming, played golf with the board members, and always seemed to have a tan even in the middle of winter. He didn't know a cargo manifest from a grocery list, but he knew how to tell a joke that made Julian laugh. Julian didn't even ask me to sit down at first. He just looked up from his desk and gave me that thin, professional smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I felt a cold knot start to form in my stomach. The air in the room felt suddenly very thin, and the binder in my hand felt like a heavy, useless weight. I knew before he even spoke. "Sit down, Silas," Julian said, finally gesturing to the empty chair next to Leo. I sat, placing my binder on my lap. Julian leaned back in his leather chair and sighed. "We've made a decision regarding the senior director role. We decided to go with Leo." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Leo, who gave me a sympathetic, yet smug, little nod. "But Julian," I started, my voice steadier than I felt. "My performance reviews have been perfect for 6 years. I ran the entire department during the strike last year. Leo has never even stepped foot in the warehouse." Julian waved his hand, as if swatting away a fly. "Leo has the vision, Silas. He has that executive presence. You're incredible at what you do, the logistics, the data, the doing. We need you exactly where you are to keep the ship steady, while Leo takes us to the next level. You're just not quite ready for the political side of leadership. You're a builder, not a face." He actually called me a builder, as if it were a life sentence. He wanted me to keep building the pedestal that Leo was going to stand on. I didn't argue further. I had seen enough movies to know that begging for a job you've earned only makes you look small. I stood up, tucked my binder under my arm, and walked out. As I reached the door, I heard Leo say, "Don't worry, Silas. I'll be leaning on you heavily for the details." That was the moment something snapped inside me. It wasn't a loud break. It was a quiet, cold realization. For 6 years, I had been the invisible pillar. I had made sure the software didn't glitch, that the routes were optimized, and that the billing was flawless. I had spent my career making other people look competent. If Julian thought I wasn't ready for politics, I would show him exactly what political warfare looked like. I wasn't going to quit. If I quit, they would just hire someone else to fill the gaps. No, I was going to stay. I was going to be the most helpful, supportive employee Leo had ever seen. I was going to give him everything he asked for, but I would give it to him in a way that would eventually bury him. The next morning, I arrived at the office an hour early. I cleared my desk of any personal photos or trinkets. I wanted my workspace to look as clinical and professional as a laboratory. When Leo strolled in at 10 in the morning, smelling like expensive cologne and holding a latte, I greeted him with a wide, bright smile. "Morning, Leo. Or should I say, Director Vance?" He grinned, clearly relieved that I wasn't going to be a problem. "Silas, good man. I was hoping we could sit down. Julian wants a big presentation for the board in 3 weeks. Something about the future of Skybound. I need the numbers, the charts, the boring stuff. I nodded eagerly. Of course. I'll handle the data architecture. I'll set up a shared drive for us. You just focus on the vision, and I'll make sure the foundation is solid. I could see him relax. He thought he had a servant. In reality, he had just handed me the keys to his reputation. I knew that Leo didn't understand complexity of our proprietary routing software. He didn't know that a single digit out of place could cause a cascade of delays. I began my campaign by creating a new, streamlined communication portal for the operations team. I told Leo it would make him look like a tech-forward leader. In reality, it was a funnel. Every piece of information now had to pass through me before it reached him, and every instruction he gave was recorded. I started small. I began cleaning up the data sets I sent him. I didn't lie, but I used alternative metric weighting. I emphasized gross revenue while subtly hiding the skyrocketing cost of last-mile delivery. Leo didn't catch it because he only looked at the bottom line on the first page. He started using my clean data in his weekly briefings with Julian. Julian was impressed. He told Leo he was a natural. Meanwhile, I was quietly moving the chess pieces. I started reaching out to our long-term warehouse managers, men like Oscar, who had been with the company for 20 years. I told him that Leo was planning a major efficiency overhaul that might involve cutting overtime. It wasn't a lie. Leo had mentioned it in passing, but I framed it as a threat. The ground was being prepared. The second week of Leo's reign was when I introduced the Auto Scheduler Alpha. I told Leo it was a revolutionary tool I'd been developing in my spare time. It uses predictive AI to assign drivers to routes. I explained during our afternoon sync. It eliminates human error. Leo loved the sound of AI. He didn't even ask to see the code. He just wanted to know if he could present it as his initiative to the board. I think it would be a great way to show your vision for a tech-driven future. I told him. He beamed. What I didn't tell him was that the Auto Scheduler Alpha had a specific flaw. It optimized for speed, but it completely ignored driver rest mandates and vehicle maintenance cycles. If used for more than 48 hours, it would create a massive bottleneck of exhausted drivers and broken-down trucks. I told Leo the first would run a simulated test for him to show the board. The results I showed him were beautiful, glowing green graphs. But the real system was a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right moment to be activated. Leo became increasingly dependent on me. He stopped coming into the office on Fridays altogether, telling Julian he was meeting with high-level stakeholders at the country club. Every time Julian asked for a report, Leo would ping me, and I would provide a glossy, perfect document within minutes. I was making him look like a superstar, but I was also making him hollow. He wasn't learning the job. He was just a puppet, and I held every single string. I began to drop helpful suggestions into his ears. Leo, you should really tell Julian that we can handle the Northern Territory expansion 6 months early. The data suggests we're ready. Leo, eager to prove his bold leadership, took the suggestion straight to Julian. Julian was thrilled. The board was ecstatic. But I knew our northern hubs were already at 90% capacity. By promising an early expansion, Leo was essentially promising to fit a gallon of water into a pint glass. He didn't check the capacity reports because I told him they were just noise and that a leader focuses on growth. The tension in the warehouse began to boil. Oscar called me late one night. Silas, what is this nonsense about the northern expansion? We don't have the rigs for it. If we push now, we'll lose half our drivers to burnout. I sighed into the phone, sounding defeated. I know, Oscar. I try to tell Leo, but he's focused on the board presentation. He says we need to be disruptors. He's the boss now. Oscar grunted. He's a suit who's going to get people hurt. Word spread through the loading docks like wildfire. The invisible pillar was still there, but now I was the one being oppressed by the incompetent new director. I was the martyr, and Leo was the villain. I continued to feed Leo's ego, telling him he was the most talked-about person in the company. He believed it. He started dressing even better, acting even more detached. He had no idea that the very men who moved the freight were beginning to despise the sound of his name. My campaign was moving from data manipulation to cultural sabotage. The week of the big board presentation arrived. This was the moment Julian had been waiting for. The formal introduction of Leo's new era. Leo was a nervous wreck, but I was there to soothe him. Don't worry, Leo. I've loaded the presentation onto the main server. I've even pre-recorded the demo of the auto-scheduler, so nothing can go wrong. All you have to do is talk. He hugged me, an awkward, frantic squeeze. I couldn't have done this without you, Silas. When I'm senior VP, I'll make sure you get a nice bonus. I smiled against his shoulder. I'm sure you will. That night, I went into the server. I didn't delete anything. I just changed the trigger for the auto-scheduler. Instead of running a simulation, the demo button on Leo's slide deck was now hard-coded to activate the live system for the entire eastern seaboard. I also added a hidden slide at the very end of the deck, a slide that contained the true, unedited capacity reports and the projected failure rates for northern expansion. It was protected by a simple delay timer. The boardroom was filled with the most powerful people in the city. Julian stood at the head of the table, looking like a proud father. Gentlemen, 6 months ago, we decided to bring a new perspective to operations. Today, Leo Vance will show you why that was the best decision Skybound ever made. Leo stood up, adjusted his tie, and began. For the first 20 minutes, he was brilliant. He spoke about synergy, digital frontiers, and paradigm shifts. He used all the buzzwords that executives love. I sat in the back of the room, a quiet shadow, operating the remote. Then came the moment for the tech demo. And here, Leo said, gesturing to the screen, is the heart of our new efficiency, the auto-scheduler. With one click, we optimize thousands of routes. He hit the button. On the screen, a map of the East Coast lit up with pulsing blue lines. It looked beautiful. What Leo didn't know was that in the real world, hundreds of tablets and truck cabs were suddenly rerouting drivers into impossible schedules. As Leo continued to gloat, my phone began to vibrate in my pocket. Then Julian's phone buzzed. Then the head of the board's phone. A soft murmur began to fill the room. Julian frowned and checked his screen. It was an emergency alert from the dispatch center. Leo, Julian interrupted, his voice tight. What is happening? I'm getting reports of a total system lockup in Jersey and Pennsylvania. Leo blinked, his smile faltering. Oh, that's probably just a sync delay, Julian. The AI is just adjusting. I stood up slowly. Actually, Leo, the system says the auto-scheduler has bypassed all safety protocols. It's sending drivers into 16-hour shifts. The warehouse managers are calling for a wildcat strike. Leo turned to me, his eyes wide with panic. What? No. Silas, fix it. You said the demo was a simulation. I looked at the board members with an expression of pure, horrified confusion. A simulation? Leo, you told me to push the alpha to live status this morning. You said we needed real-time results for the board. The room descended into chaos. Julian was on his feet, shouting into his phone. Leo was stammering, trying to find words, but the visionary was gone, replaced by a terrified man who didn't understand the tools he was supposedly wielding. Suddenly, the screen behind Leo flickered. The hidden slide appeared. It was a stark black and white table of data. It showed the massive losses we would take in the Northern Territory. It showed the internal memos where Oscar had warned about driver burnout. Memos that Leo had dismissed according to the notes I'd added. The board members leaned in, their faces turning from confusion to cold fury. Is this true, Leo? The chairman asked, his voice like ice. You knew the expansion would fail and you hit it? Leo looked at the screen, then at me. He realized then that he was standing in a trap that had been built with his own arrogance. Silas, you did this, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger. I just looked down at my lap. I only gave you the data you asked for, Leo. The board meeting was adjourned 10 minutes later. Leo was escorted out of the building by security, pending a full investigation. Julian stayed behind, slumped in his chair. The backbone was the only one left in the room with him. The phones were still ringing off the hook. The company was in a tailspin. How bad is it? Julian asked, his voice sounding old. I opened my laptop and sat down across from him. The eastern seaboard is a mess, but I can bypass the auto-scheduler manually. It will take me all night. I'll have to talk every manager down from the ledge personally. They don't trust the senior director, but they trust me. Julian looked at me for a long time. I could see him reevaluating everything. He saw the man who had the doing in the data, but also the man who was currently the only person capable of saving his company. Do it, Julian whispered. Whatever you need. Just fix it. I nodded. I'll get to work. But Julian, we're going to need to discuss the future of the Northern expansion. Honestly, I spent the next 48 hours in a trance of productivity. I was on the phone with Oscar, with the drivers, with the vendors. I was the hero of the hour. I found the errors in the code, errors I placed there, and fixed them with dramatic flair. I showed the board how Leo had misinterpreted my warnings. By Friday, the fleet was back on track, and the strike had been averted. Leo Vance was officially terminated for gross negligence and data manipulation. He tried to tell Julian that I had set him up, but Julian didn't want to hear it. To Julian, admitting I had outsmarted him in his golden boy would be admitting he was a poor judge of character. It was easier to believe Leo was just an incompetent fraud who had tricked everyone. I had made myself indispensable by allowing a disaster to happen, and then being the only person with a bucket. I wasn't just a builder anymore. I was the savior. A week later, Julian called me into his office. There were no binders this time. No golden boys in the guest chairs. Julian looked tired, defeated by the stress of the near collapse. Silas, he said, the board and I have had a long discussion. We were wrong. We mistook your quiet efficiency for a lack of ambition. We mistook Leo's loud nothingness for leadership. He pushed a folder across the desk. It was an offer for the senior director of operations position, with a salary 40% higher than what they had offered Leo. It also included a significant grant of stock options. I looked at the document, but I didn't sign it immediately. I appreciate this, Julian. Truly. But I have some conditions. I want full control over the tech department, and I want Oscar promoted to regional manager. We need people who know the ground to be in the sky. Julian nodded quickly. Anything. Just stay. We can't afford to lose you. I signed the paper with a steady hand. As I walked out of the office, I saw my reflection in the glass of the lobby. I didn't look like the invisible pillar anymore. I looked like a man who understood the weight of power. I had launched a campaign that didn't involve a single lie, only the strategic application of the truth. I had shown them that you can have a vision if you're blind to the foundation you're standing on. My first act as director was to delete the auto-scheduler alpha permanently. I didn't need AI to manage the people who trusted me. I walked down to the warehouse and found Oscar. He looked at me and gave a sharp, knowing nod. He knew. He didn't say a word, but he knew exactly how the golden boy had fallen. Director, he said, tipping his cap, ready for those northern reports? I smiled, a real smile this time. Let's look at the real numbers. Oscar, the ones that actually matter. The transition was smooth, but I remained vigilant. I knew that the political side Julian spoke of was just a game of shadows, and I had become a master of the dark. I didn't stop being efficient, but I made sure my efficiency was loud. I started sending morning briefings that highlighted the hard work of the team, making sure Julian knew that every success was a result of my direct intervention. I wasn't being arrogant. I was being visible. I learned that in the corporate world, if you don't narrate your own story, someone else will write it for you, and they'll probably make themselves a hero. Leo tried to sue for wrongful termination, but the hidden slide and the recorded logs of the commands to the system made his case fall apart before it even reached the courtroom. He vanished from the industry, his reputation a charred ruin. I didn't feel bad for him. He had been willing to step on my neck to reach the next rung. I had simply pulled the ladder away. Months passed, and Skybound Logistics reached record profitability. The northern expansion did happen, but it happened on a realistic timeline, with new rigs and rested drivers. I was invited to speak at industry conferences. People wanted to know how I had turned the company around after the Leo Vance disaster. I always told them the same thing. A company is only as strong as its most overlooked employee. Julian eventually retired, and the board didn't even look outside for a replacement. They came straight to me. I became the CEO of the company that had once told me I wasn't ready for the political side. I kept my old binder in my new office, the one filled with the data Julian hadn't wanted to see. It served as a reminder. Every time I looked at a new hire or a junior manager, I looked for the invisible pillar. I looked for the person doing the work that no one noticed, because I knew that if you don't give those people a seat at the table, they will eventually build their own table and leave you with the bill. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office when a young woman from the marketing department came in. She had a portfolio in her hand and a nervous look in her eye. She had been passed over for a lead role in favor of a guy who was great at presentations but couldn't explain the conversion metrics. I saw myself in her, the frustration, the quiet anger, the spark of a plan. I didn't give her a speech about waiting her turn. I looked at her portfolio and saw the brilliance in her data. You're the one who ran the social media campaign that doubled our engagement last month, aren't you? I asked. She nodded, surprised I knew. The lead gets the credit, but you did the work. I leaned back in my chair. Don't quit. Don't get loud. Just make sure that the next time they ask for a miracle, you're the only one who knows the incantation. She smiled, and it was a look I recognized. It was a look of a builder who was ready to become a face. I realized that my campaign hadn't just been about revenge. It had been about a fundamental shift in the company's DNA. By making Leo look incompetent, I had forced the board to confront their own biases. They had been seduced by presence and vision because those things are easy to consume. Real competence is dense. It requires effort to understand. I had taught them that lesson the hard way. Now, the culture at Skybound was different. We had competence audits instead of just performance reviews. We looked at the how as much as the what. I made sure that the backbones of the company were celebrated, not just used. My name was on the building now, but I still spent one Friday every month in the warehouse with Oscar. I never wanted to forget what the grease felt like. I never wanted to become a Julian Vane, a man who lost his company because he couldn't see the person holding it up. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I ran into Leo at Charity Gala a year later. He was working as a consultant for a small firm, looking haggard and desperate. He tried to avoid me, but I walked right up to him. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The fact that I was the keynote speaker and he was trying to hide behind a shrimp cocktail was enough. How's the vision, Leo? I asked softly. He looked at me with pure hatred. You ruined me, Silas. You played a dirty game. I shook my head. No, Leo, I played your game, the political one. I just played it better because I actually knew how the pieces moved. You forgot that you were standing on my shoulders. When I moved, you fell. It's just physics. I walked away, feeling a final, cold click of closure. The campaign was over. The victory was complete. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I could have achieved the same result without the chaos. Could I have just talked to Julian one more time? But then I remember his face that rainy Tuesday, the way he looked through me. Some people only listen when the world starts to burn. I hadn't started the fire. I had just removed the fire extinguishers that I had been providing for free. I had shown them the reality they had been ignoring. I wasn't a villain. I was a mirror, and if they didn't like what they saw in the reflection, that wasn't my fault. I had reclaimed my value, and in doing so, I had saved a company that was heading for a cliff. My story isn't one of a disgruntled employee. It's the story of a man who decided that his silence was no longer for sale. Today, Skybound Logistics is the leader in the industry. We are known for our reliability and our innovation. But more than that, we are known as a place where the workers are respected. I often think about that $942.16 bill from the other story, or the locked office door. My betrayal was professional, but the root was the same, a lack of respect. When you treat people like tools, you shouldn't be surprised when they stop working for you. I used my invisible status as a weapon, and it was the most effective one I ever owned. Now, I am visible, but I haven't forgotten the power of the shadow. I am the CEO, but in my heart, I am still the guy in the suit with the thick binder, waiting for a meeting. The difference is, now I'm the one who decides who gets to sit at the table. To anyone out there who feels like the invisible pillar, I have one piece of advice. Do not wait for them to notice you. Do not hope that your hard work will eventually be rewarded by their kindness. People who exploit your silence will never reward your voice. You have to create a situation where your absence is more powerful than your presence. You have to let the golden boys fail on their own merits. When the system starts to crack because you aren't there to hold it together, they will finally see you. And when they do, make sure you have your conditions ready. My name is Silas, and I used to be a backbone. Now I am the head, the heart, and the hands. And I will never let myself be overlooked again. The campaign is over, but the lesson remains. Never underestimate the person who knows where all the bolts are hidden. They might just decide to unscrew them.